morning. We're Maseches Shekalim, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Vav, page 7 of the Mishnah Behira. And we mentioned yesterday, excuse me, the concept of kalbon, a little extra. There's something a little extra you add to the Maktas HaShekel under certain circumstances. And according to Rav Meir, it appears under all circumstances. We're going to learn the Mishnah in the most simple way we can. There are a lot of different explanations to what this kalbon is and why you need to add a kalbon according to the Chachamim sometimes, and according to Rav Meir most of the time. We'll see the Chachamim and Rav Meir in the Mishnah. But there's a wide variety of explanations as to why this kalbon even became a subject. So we're going to learn the Mishnah in a simple way. It's basically the format used by the Kahati explanation to the Mishnah. Let's make believe that a kalbon is 20 agurot. So the Mishnah is now going to discuss those people who have to give, besides the Maktas HaShekel, they have to give the kalbon, a little extra. So we said yesterday there were two theories to the kalbon. One theory is that smaller, as we said yesterday, smaller bills are more in demand, except when you want to count your money, if that's what you're into. When people want to count their money, they like to see a big stack of 200 shekel bills, much more than a stack of 20 shekel bills. On the other hand, when you're going into a taxi and you're taking a 15 or 20 shekel ride and you pull out the 200 shekel bill, the taxi driver is going to be quite upset. He's going to shout at you and tell you he doesn't have change. Sometimes you go into a store and you have only a 200 shekel bill and you just want to buy a milk and there's no change. So the kupa'it has to leave the store, go to the store next door and get some change for you. So there's a certain value to smaller bills, smaller amounts. They're more easily used in the marketplace. So the first concept of kalbon is that the gizbar, the treasurer in the Beis HaMikdash, wants half shekels. The gizbar, the treasurer, is going to give out the money to be to various people who work for him in the Beis HaMikdash, and they're going to go out and buy things for the Beis HaMikdash. They're going to go buy animals for karbonos, etc. And it's more convenient to go into the marketplace for with a Maktas HaShekel. So if a person brings a shekel into the marketplace, he goes over to the fish stand and the person says, I can't sell you the fish because I don't have change of a shekel. You go over to the chicken counter, he says, I can't sell you anything because I don't have change for a shekel. So what do you end up doing? You end up going a couple of stands down, and you go to the shulchani, the table, and you go to the money change, and you tell them, I have a shekel, I need to break it into smaller coins so that I can buy the chicken and the fish. So he says, fine, give me the shekel, and you pay him a fee because you are buying money. You are giving him a shekel and buying 2 Maktas HaShekels, 2 half shekels. When you do that, there's a fee. Let's call it 20 agurot. You have to pay a fee. The same thing is true if you go to the Beis HaMikdash with a shekel, and we're using the simplest case. That's all you need to do is pay your own private Maktas HaShekel. You walk in and you give in a shekel. Well, if you wanted to do that in the marketplace, you would have to pay the 20 agurot for the exchange. So here you're going to give the gizbar a shekel, and you're going to want to get back a half a shekel. So we're going to see that case in the Mishnah. You are thereby forcing the gizbar to end up in the marketplace and changing shekels into half shekels. So there's going to be an exchange rate that you're going to have to pay the gizbar. In other words, this theory of kalbon is that the half shekel coin is worth more than the full shekel coin, not in terms of how much it can buy. Obviously, a shekel can buy more than a half a shekel, but the capacity to be used. A half a shekel has a greater capacity to be used in the marketplace than a shekel. When you're going to create a situation where the gizbar is going to have to exchange, you're going to have to pay him that 20 agurot, that kalbon. That's one theory of kalbon. The other theory of kalbon is when the Ribono Shel Olam told Moshe Rabbeinu to collect a machzis hashekel from every Jew in Parshas Kisisa, and the machzis hashekel is going to be used for public related expenses of the Beis HaMikdash, or related to Klal Yisrael. We'll see what the machzis hashekel is used for next week, Bli Neder. The Ribono Shel Olam said to Moshe, Zeh yitnu. That's a pasuk in Parshas Kisisa. This you will give. And the Gemara and the Medrash tells us that the Ribono Shel Olam showed Moshe Rabbeinu a machzis hashekel in fire, matbeya shel eish, and said, Zeh yitnu, not kazeh, zeh. This exact thing is the machzis hashekel. And to make sure, that the machzis hashekel that you give to the Beis HaMikdash has the value and the weight in silver. The Torah describes the value of the machzis hashekel, esrim geira machzis hashekel truma l'Hashem. It has to have a certain weight in silver. So to make sure that the machzis hashekel that you're giving to the Beis HaMikdash is going to be the weight in silver and the value of the machzis hashekel of Moshe Rabbeinu, so we say give a kalbon, give another 20 agurot to the gizbar, and in this way we ensure that you've given at least the proper value of Moshe Rabbeinu's machzis hashekel. How much is this kalbon? We'll see today at the end of the Mishnah. But we're just using as an example 20 agurot. So there are two different theories to kalbon. One theory is, and the Rambam adopts this theory, one theory is, look, a shekel is worth more than a half a shekel. It has greater buying power than a machzis hashekel. When you want to go into the everyday marketplace, a machzis hashekel has the capacity to buy more than the shekel, not in terms of quantity. Obviously, if you want to buy a large quantity, a shekel is going to be worth more than a machzis shekel. When you want to go to different stores and different stands in the marketplace, you need a piece of chicken, a piece of fish, and yichrin, etc. Nobody wants to take the shekel. Everybody wants smaller change. So the Rambam says when you give a certain amount of money to the gizbar, you're going to have to pay a kalbon. So, for example, if a person walks into the gizbar and gives him a machzis hashekel, according to the Rambam, the way he learns the Mishnah, you would not have to pay a kalbon, because the kalbon is there to repay the gizbar, the treasurer of the Beis HaMikdash, for the fact that he's going to have to go into the market and pay an exchange rate, but he won't have to pay an exchange rate. You gave him a machzis hashekel, so every person who comes and gives a simple machzis hashekel does not have to pay kalbon. According to the other shita, that the theory of kalbon is to make up a little money in case your machzis hashekel is not worth Moshe Rabbeinu's machzis hashekel, then you're going to have to give a kalbon even if you bring a machzis hashekel to the Beis HaMikdash. So according to the Rambam, not everybody has to pay a kalbon. The person who brings a machzis hashekel for himself doesn't have to pay a kalbon. According to the other theory of kalbon, which is hechreya, to make sure that you have the weight and value of Moshe Rabbeinu's Matzes HaShekel, you're going to have to pay a kalbon, even if you're paying a Matzes HaShekel for yourself. So now the Mishnah says on page 7 of Shekalim, Mishnah Behira, Merek Aleph, Mishnah Vav, Ve'elu shechayovim b'kalbon. These are the people that would have to pay a kalbon under the correct circumstances. Leviim, Yisraelim, Gerim, Va'avodim, Meshachrorim. In other words, only a person that is required to give a Matzes HaShekel, when he gives the Matzes HaShekel under conditions that require a kalbon, he will have to give a kalbon. But avolo kohanim v'noshim v'avodim uktanim. As we learned, a Kohen is required to give the Matzes HaShekel. If he doesn't pay it, we don't forcibly collect it from him because of the concept of chelef avodasam. He's working in the Beis HaMikdash for us, and if he doesn't give the Matzes HaShekel, Beis Din made a tanai, a condition that extra Matzes HaShekel that's in his pocket that belongs to the Beis HaMikdash, the Beis HaMikdash is paying him that Matzes HaShekel for his work in the Beis HaMikdash. So while he should bring a Matzes HaShekel, if he doesn't, we don't forcibly collect. Therefore, if a Kohen brings a Matzes HaShekel, we never charge him a kalbon for himself. V'noshim, women are not mechuyev in the Matzes HaShekel. If they decide to bring the Matzes HaShekel, they don't pay kalbon. Va'avodim, avodim, an Eved Kanani who has the same rules as a woman, a Gentile servant who already is in a sort of a twilight zone. He had Mila and Tvila. Va'avodim, uktanim. Ktanim, as we said, are young men under the age of 20, because in Parshas Kisis it says, Kol ha'ovra kudim ben esim shana v'mala. You have to be over 20 to pay the Matzes HaShekel. That's what it sounds like. And that's where we are right now in Ktanim. So a Kohen who does have to give a Matzes HaShekel, but we would not forcibly collect it from him. A woman, an Eved Kanani, a young man under 20, and they want to give the Matzes HaShekel. They're not required to. They just want to. And we learned yesterday that we're permitted to accept the Matzes HaShekel from these people, even though they're not required to. As we explained yesterday, if someone's required to give the Matzes HaShekel, it becomes a debt. When you pay your debt, we don't really care whether you're paying your debt wholeheartedly, half-heartedly, whether you really want to give it, you don't want to give, we don't care. You're paying a debt. Therefore, your money is going into the public treasury, and it's now public money. And the karbonis, carbon tamid, carbon musaf, the karbonis have to be bought with public money. And the money that you give to the gizbar, which you are required to give, you are paying a debt, and therefore your money becomes public money, irrespective of what you think about the requirement to give that money. On the other hand, for example, a woman who is not required to give the Matzes HaShekel, we have to teach the woman or the man, a young man under 20, who are not required to give the Matzes HaShekel, we have to teach them the rule of Mosar Yafa Yafa. You have to give it wholeheartedly. You have to understand that the Matzes HaShekel you're giving is not to pay a debt. You're not required to give it. But nevertheless, you want to convert your private money into public money. Because if they don't understand this and they think that they're giving private money and it remains sort of the property of the gizbar because of the benevolence of their heart, that's not the Mosar Yafa Yafa, and that creates a very serious problem, because that means the money that the gizbar has is now mixed between public money and someone's private money who happens to have donated it, but it didn't convert into public money. So when you pay a debt, it converts into public money. When you're donating, it doesn't convert into public money, which it needs to, unless you are Mosar Yafa Yafa. the Gemara tells it. It has to be given over very well with the full intention that this is now public money. It is no longer my money in any which way, shape, or form. So when these people, Kohanim, Noshim, Avodim, Ketanim, decide they want to give a maktas a shekel, we're allowed to accept it from them, but we don't charge them a kalbon because they're not required to give the money altogether. Hashokel al Yidei Kohen. A person comes to the Beis Hamikdash and he wants to pay his maktas hashekel for himself, and he also wants to pay the maktas hashekel for a Kohen. Kohen is the best example because he's actually required to give the maktas hashekel, and he wants to give it, but he doesn't have a maktas hashekel. So his friend comes to the Beis Hamikdash and says, I want to pay my maktas hashekel, and the second maktas hashekel I'm giving you is for that Kohen, and it's a loan. The Kohen is going to pay me back. It is not a gift to the Kohen. A gift is going to have a different rule. Al Yidei Isha, Al Yidei Eved, Al Yidei Katan, or the three cases where a person's not required at all to pay the maktas hashekel. He comes to the Beis Hamikdash and says, here's my maktas hashekel, and here it is for a woman, for a servant, or for a young man under 20, potter. He doesn't pay a kalbon because he lent the money to these people. And because he lent the money to the people, these people are not required to pay altogether. So again, we don't have the payment of a debt that would require a kalbon. So even though the person that's paying the maktas hashekel is required to pay the maktas hashekel, if he also pays the maktas hashekel for another person who is not required to give the maktas hashekel, there is no payment of kalbon because that other person you're paying for is not required at all to pay their maktas hashekel. Ve'im shokal al yodai, we're turning now to page 8. Ve'im shokal al yodai v'al yad chaveiroi chayev b'kalbon echad. But if you're paying for yourself and someone else, you're paying for yourself and someone else who's also required to pay for it. I come to the Beis Hamikdash to the Gizbar, and I tell the Gizbar, here's a maktas hashekel for myself, and my next door neighbor, who is over 20, and he's a Yisrael, I'm paying for him too, and I'm paying it as a loan. He's going to pay me back. That's what im shokal al yodei v'yad chaveiroi. He paid for himself, he paid for someone else who's required to pay the maktas hashekel. Chayev kalbon echad. He's required to pay only one kalbon. Why? Because he gave the gizbar a full shekel for two people, and the gizbar is going, this is the sheet of the Chachamim, the sheet of the first sheet in the Mishnah that we discussed when we started today. This has nothing to do with weights. This is a question of the gizbar really should have had 2 half shekels. I should have brought a half shekel, and my neighbor should have brought a half shekel. Instead, I brought the gizbar a whole shekel for me, which I'm required to give, and for my neighbor, who's also required to give, and he's going to pay me back. So in other words, I paid the gizbar 1 shekel, where really the gizbar should have received 2 maktas hashekels. So he's going to go to the marketplace and have to exchange the shekel for 2 half shekels. And for that, he's going to pay a kalbon. Therefore, when I give him the shekel for 2 people, I have to pay that kalbon. Ve'im shokal al yodei v'al yad chaveiroi chayev b'kalbon echad. You're chayev to give 1 kalbon. Reb Meir says, in such a case, where I give 1 shekel to the gizbar, half of it for myself, half of it for my next door neighbor, who's also required to give it. Now I give him the 1 shekel. Rav Meir says you have to pay 2 kalbones. According to the Chachamim, when I paid the shekel to the gizbar, half for me, half for my neighbor, I would add 20 agurot because that would be the exchange fee for the treasurer to turn the shekel into 2 half shekels. Rav Meir says, no, you have to pay 40 agurot, 2 kalbones. Why? Because Rav Meir's theory of kalbon has nothing to do with the exchange fee. According to Rav Meir, the issue is the weight, the hechreya. And since I gave you a shekel, and that shekel is supposed to take care of 2 people's machzis shekel, and each person's machzis shekel may not be the full weight, so therefore I have to pay the gizbar, the treasurer, a kalbon for myself because my half shekel that's in that shekel may not be full weight, and my neighbor's half shekel that's in that shekel may not be full weight, so I pay the 2 kalbones or 40 agurot. Hano saying that's the machlokes of the Chachamim and Reb Meir. Basically, this is how the Kahati Mishnayos learns the machlokes, and that's probably the simplest way to learn the machlokes. The Chachamim's theory of kalbon is you have to add it where the gizbar will have to pay an exchange fee. Reb Meir says it has nothing to do with an exchange fee, it has to do with hechreya. Is there enough weight in the machzis shekel? Now the Mishnah comes up with a new case, and in this case, everyone agrees you pay a double kalbon. Hano saying sela, sela here means a whole shekel. Somebody gives a shekel to the gizbar just for himself. He walks into the Beis HaMikdash with a full shekel. Venotel shekel. The word shekel here means a half shekel. Sela means a whole shekel, and shekel means a half shekel. So you walk in to the gizbar and you give him a full shekel just for yourself. And what do you want? You want the gizbar to give you change. You want him to give you a machzis shekel. Chayev shnei kalbonos. Then everyone holds there's a double kalbon. And here there's a question of why everyone agrees there's a double kalbon. According to Reb Meir, who holds the issue as hachreya, obviously you have an issue of hachreya, double. You took a machzis shekel and you gave a shekel. So there's going to be a double kalbon. And according to the Chachamim, you're going to pay double kalbon because the gizbar not only is going to have to take the shekel and the shekel you gave him and convert it into 2 shekels, which means he's going to pay a kalbon, but there's also the issue, and this is a whole new shot, there's also an issue that since you didn't bring, you're only bringing for yourself. You're not bringing for yourself and your neighbor. That's the case where Reb Meir and the Chachamim have a disagreement. The Chachamim say pay 1 kalbon, and Reb Meir says pay 2. Here we're talking about just coming by yourself, and that's all you really should bring is a machzis shekel to make life simple for the gizbar. Instead, you brought him a shekel. Now this person could have gone to a money changer. And remember, the money changer set up tables on the 15th of Adar. You could have gone to a money changer and changed your shekel into 2 half shekels and paid the kalbon. Instead, for whatever reason, you came to the Beis HaMikdash or you gave it into your city collection. We'll talk about that next week, Bli Neder, how this money got to the Beis HaMikdash. But you came, you only want to pay a machzis shekel. And instead, you brought a full shekel. So there's no question that you're going to pay, according to the Chachamim, at least 1 kalbon, because the gizbar is going to have to take the shekel and pay a fee to break it into 2 half shekels. But on top of that, you're going to pay another kalbon because the Torah said that if you're coming and paying the machzis shekel, you are to bring a machzis shekel. And because you didn't heed those words and instead paid a shekel, it almost sounds like a knas, you're going to pay a second kalbon. So if you come to the Beis HaMikdash, or you pay the collector a whole shekel, half for yourself and half for your neighbor who's over 20 and who is a Yisrael, Chachamim say 1 kalbon, Rameir says 2 kalbones. If, however, you come and pay a shekel just for yourself and you want change of a maktis a shekel, then everyone holds you're going to pay 2 kalbones. If we go to the bottom of page 8 in the Mishnah Behira, there's a wonderful chart there. Tosefes kalbon. When do you add the kalbon? And underneath there it says Leperish Harav. He's saying that what I'm about to write is according to the Rav, Rabbeinu Avadia Mibar Tanura's explanation of the Mishnah. First line, Hachayovim v'apeturim mikalbon. Who has to pay a kalbon? Who doesn't have to pay a kalbon? Now, first, we're talking about who has to and who doesn't. There are some people that simply don't have to pay a kalbon at all because they're not even required ever to give a maktis a shekel. And if they give it, it's only because they want to. And therefore, we don't charge such people for donations an extra kalbon. A person that's required to pay a maktis a shekel, there are times we will add a kalbon. A person that's not even required to pay it, and out of the goodness of his heart comes and pays it and converts it into public money, we don't charge him the kalbon. So first we have the question of who would be required to pay a kalbon, and then if you're required to pay a kalbon, what are the circumstances under which you would pay the kalbon? So the first line is just categories of people. Column to the left side, hachayov. Who have to pay a kalbon? Leviim, Yisraelim, Geirim, Avodim, Mishuchrorim, Lefi Shehinam, Chayov, Maktis HaShekel, Umashkinim, Oisahola. These people are required to give a Maktis HaShekel. If they don't give it, we forcibly collect it from them. Therefore, we're talking about a real debt obligation. And therefore, because it's a debt obligation, we also add a kalbon to make sure that the debt is paid correctly. Hapeturim. Who doesn't ever have to pay a kalbon? Kohanim, Noshim, Avodim, Uktanim. A woman comes to the gizbar or the collector and says, here's my maktis hashekel. And he explains to her, you have to give it, yofa, you have to give it and convert it completely to public money without second thoughts. She says, okay, 100%. He's not going to say to her, well, now I need 20 more agurot for the kalbon. There's no collecting kalbon from a person who in the first instance is not even required to pay it. The same thing is true if a person decides to pay the maktis hashekel for these people, either as a loan or as a gift. You only had a kalbon. So if I come to the Beis HaMikdash and I say, here's a half a shekel for me, here's another half a shekel for my wife. According to the Chachamim, there is no kalbon at all. The Chachamim hold the kalbon is there because you have to reimburse the treasurer for having to pay an exchange fee. There's no exchange fee. I gave him a half a shekel for myself. I gave him a half a shekel for my wife. There's no exchange fee there at all. There is a machlokes. If I give the gizbar a whole shekel for myself and my wife, whether there's a kalbon, we'll assume now that there is no kalbon because I gave the gizbar a full shekel, half for myself and half for my wife. You don't charge me a kalbon now because although you may have to pay a fee, let's think about this. I gave the gizbar a maktis hashekel. I'm supposed to give the gizbar a maktis hashekel. Let's say a maktis hashekel is worth 200 shekel. Well, let's stop using shekels, then we'll get confused. I give the gizbar a maktis hashekel. A maktis hashekel is worth $100. Instead, I give the gizbar a whole shekel. A whole shekel is worth $200. And that whole shekel represents my half shekel. And out of the goodness of my heart, I decide to give you another $100 on behalf of my wife. So now you have the value of a shekel, which is $200. And I only had to give you a half a shekel, which is worth $100. So you're not going to charge me 20 agurot because you need to go into the market to change the shekel into two half shekels, because I gave you $100 extra that I didn't have to give you. My wife does not have to pay the maktas a shekel. So if I walk in and I give you a full shekel and I say half of the shekel value is for me, half of the shekel is for my wife, the gizmo is not going to say to me and throw in 20 agurot as the kalbon. What are you talking about? I just gave you $100 extra for my wife that my wife never had to pay. So there's no kalbon according to the simple understanding. There is no kalbon where you come to the gizmo and you give him a whole shekel, half for yourself and half for someone else who's not required to give it at all. So hapeturim, kohanim, noshim, avodim, uketanim. The woman herself gives a maktas a shekel. You don't charge her kalbon. V'chein hanosin avur maktas a shekel b'halvo b'matana. Or the man comes in and pays a full shekel, half of the value for him, half of the value for his wife. You're not going to charge him a kalbon either. V'chein hanose maktas a shekel b'matana avur chaveiro. The same thing is true if I come to the Beis Hamikdash and I say, here is a shekel. Half of the value is for me, and half of the value is a gift for my next door neighbor who's over 20 in Israel. So I'm giving a gift. I'm not required to give the maktas shekel for my neighbor. Now, if I made a loan to my neighbor, that's a different thing, because then my neighbor is going to pay me back. And in the end, I really only gave the gizbar a half a shekel. I gave him a shekel right now, but half is for me, and I'm going to get back half from my neighbor. And there would be a kalbon charge if it was a loan. But if I come to the gizbar and say, here's a shekel, half value is for me, half value is for my neighbor who I'm giving a gift to. I'm not obligated to give him a gift. So we're again in that area where out of the goodness of my heart, I'm making it easier for the gizbar. I'm giving him my maktas a shekel, and I'm telling him I'm taking care of my body also. Don't worry about it. You don't have to chase him. It's a gift. We don't charge him a kalbon. In each of these cases, the person who gave the maktas a shekel, whether it's a woman on her own, or her husband for the wife, or myself for my neighbor who's otherwise chayav, but I give him matana. In none of these cases, there's an obligation to do this. And if there's no obligation to do it, there's no kalbon. Next line. Hanosein shekel shalem, machatziso la'atzmo, umachatziso b'halvo l'chaveiro. This is the case of a loan. I come to the gizbar, I give him a shekel. I say half of it is for me, half of it is for my neighbor who's a male over 20, and it's a loan. He's going to pay me back that half a shekel. So what I've really given to the gizbar is my half shekel. The half shekel that my friend is required to give, he's going to pay me back. So we look at it as if I have done I've paid two requirements. I've not given anyone a gift here. So I fulfilled my requirement and I paid his requirement temporarily because he's going to pay me back. So what happens when I do that? I come to the gizbar, I say, here's a shekel, half value for me, half value for my neighbor, male over 20, and he's going to pay me back. So here we have the machlokas. Chachomim, according to the Chachomim, the first sheet in the Mishnah, no saying kalbon echad. You just pay one kalbon, you pay 20 agurot. Lefi shenosan shekel b'mochem machatzios hanachutzos yosef. This is the Rambam's explanation. Shenosan shekel. This I gave a shekel to the gizbar. Why did I give him a shekel? To pay my debt and to pay my neighbor's debt for which he's going to repay me. and I now inconvenience the gizbar because he needs to take that shekel and go to a changer and convert it into 2 half shekels, and he'll have to probably pay a fee for it. Shenosan shekel, he paid a shekel, b'mokom machatzios hanachutzos yoisa. He gave a shekel in a place where half shekel is more important. The half shekel is not worth as much as a shekel, but its capacity to be used by the gizbar is greater. Therefore, a kalbon will be charged if what you're doing is paying a shekel, half value for me, half value for my neighbor, and I'm going to collect the loan back from my neighbor, 1 kalbon, because the theory of kalbon, according to the Chachamim, is exchange fee. And you're going to cause here an exchange fee by paying 2 separate requirements. Therefore, you're going to be charged the kalbon. Rabbi Meir, on the other hand, the second sheet in the Mishnah says, back to the chart, no saying shnei kalbonos. In this case, you pay 2 kalbonos, 40 agurot. Lefi shaladaitoi, because according to Rabbi Meir, kol hanoisen machtes hashekel, Yosef kalbon. Rabbi Meir holds whoever pays a machtes hashekel has to pay a kalbon. Even if I walk into the Beis Hamikdash and I say, here's a machtes hashekel just for myself. You can't get any simpler than that. I'm one person, male over 20. I want to give you an exact machtes hashekel that is going around in the country today. Here it is. Can't get simpler than that. But Meir says you're still going to pay a kalbon. Why? Levada, to guarantee she'enu goremi machzes hashekel shel Torah, that you're not giving anything less than the full value of a machzes hashekel of Torah. This is a value issue. Therefore, if you come to the Beis Hamikdash and you're going to pay a shekel, half is for me and half the value is for my neighbor who is also required to give a machzes hashekel, you're going to pay 2 kalbons. First of all, my half value in the shekel may be less than the Moshe Rabbeinu value, and his half in the shekel may be less than the Moshe Rabbeinu value. So both of us need to pay a kalbon. So therefore, I'm going to pay 40 agurot. So we have the people in the first column, the first line of the chart, who has to pay kalbon, who never has to pay kalbon. The second line of the chart, we have the first case. I'm going to pay a full shekel, half for me, and half for my buddy who's going to pay me back as a loan. So therefore, I'm paying 2 requirements. There's no gifts here. In that case, Chachamim say 1 kalbon, because the Gizbar is going to have to break that into 2 half shekels and pay for that. So you're going to pay for that. 1 kalbon. In that case, Reb Meir says a double kalbon, 40 agurot, because in that full shekel, there's the value of 2 half shekels. And we don't know if the value of each of those half shekels equals Moshe Rabbeinu's half shekel. So each half is going to need its own kalbon. So you're going to pay 40 agurot. So this is the machlokas Chachamim Reb Meir. Chachamim say the kalbon theory is that you have to be able to reimburse the gizbar for any exchange fee. And Reb Meir says it's because you want to make sure that the weight is appropriate, that it is Moshe Rabbeinu's weight to add the kalbon, and therefore you have a kalbon. You only have 1 kalbon in this case. According to Reb Meir, you have 2 kalbons. But now let's go to the simplest case, right? Come to the Beis Hamikdash and I say, here is a machtes hashekel. Just for myself, simplest case. According to Chachamim, there's no kalbon there because the gizbar doesn't have to pay an exchange fee. According to Reb Meir, even in that simple case, there'll be a kalbon, because it could be the machtes hashekel that I gave for myself may not be the full weight and value of Moshe Rabbeinu's machtes hashekel. So even in the simplest case, Reb Meir is going to say you pay a kalbon. Now we go to the third case in Mishnah, the third line of the chart. Hanosein shekel v'notel machtes. I come into the Beis Hamikdash and I say, Gizbar, here is a shekel. give me back half a shekel of change. Okay, here everyone agrees, no saying shnei kalbonos. That person's going to pay a double kalbon, 40 agurot. Echad kiven shleinitin machtas kanedrish. First of all, he's going to pay the 20 agurot. It's almost like a penalty, a knas. We told you to bring a machtas a shekel. We're very happy that it was more convenient for you to come in with the full shekel. But now, if that's the way you want to do things, and you want to bring the shekel instead of the machtas shekel that the Torah said you bring, you're going to pay an extra 20 agurot for that. Shaloi nitten machtas kanedish. Ve'echad al hatzorech lifrod ulekabel odef mehagizbar. And the other is, of course, the exchange rate cost. You're making the gizbar take a shekel from you and give you back a half shekel, and he's going to go into the market and he's going to flip that shekel into 2 half shekels. So again, you're going to have to pay that kalbon. So that's a double kalbon. Those are the multiple cases. You have a case where you go and pay for your friend who is a male over 20, and that itself has 2 cases. Are you paying for him as a gift, or are you paying for him as a loan? You have a case where you're just paying for yourself, and you bring a machtas shekel. Is there a kalbon at all? You have the case where you're paying, but you're going to pay for yourself and for someone who's not even required. You're going to pay for your wife. You have a case where the woman is just bringing the machtas shekel by herself. And those are all the cases that when you have the case where a person brings a shekel and wants change. Those are all the cases we just discussed in the Mishnah, and those are the cases that are on your chart. I'm going to read Mishnah Zayin now and explain it. It's also kalbon, and that will basically finish the discussion of kalbon. I'll then take a look. I see there are some questions that came up about kalbon. I must admit, I'm not an expert in many things. And to the extent I am an expert in anything, it's very few things. But I can tell you in this kalbon sugya, I'm very much not an expert, because there are a lot of shittas of what the kalbon is, what triggers it, and I just explained it in the most simplest way so that we can go through the chart we just went through based upon that simple pshat in the Mishnah. Okay, Mishnah Zayin on page 9. Hashokol al yidei oni. I come to the gizbar and I say, I want to pay my machtas shekel, and I also want to pay from a person I happen to know. He's in bad shape, bad condition. He's poor. He can't afford the machtas shekel. I'm paying for him. It's a gift. What's the rule when I come and I give a shekel? Half of it is for me, and half of it is a gift to someone. Right? If it's a complete gift, what did we learn before? Let's go back to the chart. First line of the chart. Hachayovim v'apturim mikalbon. Hapeturim. Second line. V'chein hanose machtas hashekel b'matona avur chaveiro. If you're going to give an extra machtas hashekel for your friend as a gift, you don't pay a kalbon. So this is just another example. Hashokol al yedei ani. You give the gizbar the money, and you say it's for me and my poor buddy, and he's never going to pay me back. It's a gift, no kalbon. Al yedei shcheno, or a neighbor. I'm giving this as a complete gift for my neighbor. Al yedei ben iro, or this person that lives in my city, I'm giving him a gift. Just common examples, potter. You don't have to pay the kalbon. V'im hilvon, but if you paid for them and they're required, the poor person is a male over 20, the neighbor is a male over 20, the buddy you have in the city is a male over 20, you give it as a gift, no kalbon. You give it as a loan, chayiv. You pay a kalbon, and that's basically the rule we learned and spoke out in the last Mishnah and appeared in the chart. Now we have a new case. It's not complicated, it just introduces a new rule. You have two brothers. La'aleinu, their father died. And there's a Yerusha. They haven't divided yet the Yerusha. This is yours, this is mine, this is mine, this is yours. They haven't divided yet the Yerusha. Then there's a case where they did divide the Yerusha. Pre-Yerusha, pre-split and post-split. We'll call it pre-division and post-division. And sometimes after post-division, they've separated the cash, the furniture, they've separated everything. This is yours, this is mine. And after the post-division, the two brothers say, you know what? Let's pool some money together and buy a piece of real estate. They then become partners in that real estate because they've already split the Yerusha. Each brother owns what he owns. And now when they pool the money together, they have the status of partners. But let's say before they split the Yerusha, Papa left this and this and this. They don't get into who's getting what. They just say, you know what? Let's take $1,000 of Papa's money and invest in a piece of real estate. They're not partners because they are investing what is still Papa's money, although Papa's not here, but they haven't yet divided Papa's money anywhere. So there are two cases. Pre-division, let's go and take $1,000 of Papa's money and buy real estate. That is not a partnership. The second is post-division. You take this, I'll take this, I'll take this, you take that, gone. Now they're sitting over tea and Danish, and they say, how about each of us puts $500 into a pot and we invest the $1,000 in real estate. Now we got a partner situation. And that's what the Mishnah is going to discuss now. Ha'achim, now the girsa here, if you take a look at the top of your page in the Rabbeinu Avadim Bar Tanura Mishnah Zayin, 4 lines on the top, the bold words are ha'achim hashutafim. There's no vav there, ha'achim v'hashutafim. And that's how we're going to read the Mishnah the way the Rav had it. So back to the Mishnah, ha'achim hashutafim. Brothers who are partners. Now, how can they be partners? It's because they already divided everything, and then they got together and decided to invest in something. So they became partners. If you read the Rav, 4th line from the top, Achim shehem shutafim, brothers who became partners, shecholku, they divided the Yerusha, v'chazru v'nishtatfu, and then they pooled money together, and now they're partners. She'oz heim chayovim b'kalbon kishar shnei anoshim sheshaklu sloyim. Then you have two people. The Yerusha has been split. Each of them now owns what they own. One of them comes and gives the gizbar a shekel. And he says, I'm paying it for myself and for my brother. My brother's going to pay me back. So what does the Mishnah say? Ha'achim hashutofim shechayovim b'kalbon. When they are chayav in kalbon. In other words, it's post-division, and they became partners in some business. And now one of them comes and gives a shekel to the gizbar and says, it's for me and my brother will pay me back. They're chayav in kalbon. Why are they chayav to pay the kalbon? Because they're two individuals. The money that they're paying is their money. It's not Papa's money. They divided the money. And therefore, the money that they're going to pay the gizbar is their own personal money. Each of them has their own personal money. Each of them are required to pay the maktas hashekel. So when one comes and pays for both of them, there's going to be a kalbon there. The fact that they're brothers becomes immaterial. These are two people, and one of them is paying for the other, and it's a loan. We learned that if that's the case, you pay a kalbon. But in that case, Peturim Mimaisa Behema. If these two brothers took money and invested in buying some cattle, calves, whatever, they don't have to give Meiser Behema. Meiser Behema is at a certain point in the year, you count how many animals you have, you count your sheep. Every 10th sheep is Meiser Behema. Meiser Behema, you have to take to the Beis HaMikdash, it becomes a korban, the owner eats from it, and it's a korban. It's kachekal. This is in contradistinction to an animal that belongs to partners. If I go into the animal marketplace with a friend of mine, and the owner says it's $100, and I give 75, and he gives 25, I give 50, and he gives 50, we now own this animal as partners. If you own the animal as partners, there's no din of Meiser Behema, that on that animal, it's only one, but even if that animal has children, there's no Meiser Behema on the offspring. I and a friend of mine, we go to an animal dealer, we say we want 1,000 animals. And I pay half, he pays half. The animals are parted from Meiser Behema. There's no Meiser Behema obligation because we learn out of a pasuk, the animal that belongs to partners does not have to pay, does not have to give Meiser Behema. So the Mishnah is just showing you a contrast. If you're in a situation where you would pay a kalbon, if you're in a situation where two brothers would pay a kalbon, why would they pay the kalbon? Because they divided Papa's money. Each of them owns the money. And if one of them has to pay the machzas hashekel for the two of them, he's paying two debts. He's not paying it out of Papa's money. These are two separate debts. Then you have to pay a kalbon. Well, if you're going to pay a kalbon, that must mean that it's post-division and everybody has their own money. And if they buy animals together, they're partners. The two are Meiser Behema. So in a case where two brothers and one brother would pay the machzas hashekel, there'd be a kalbon. In that same case, if they owned animals, they wouldn't have to give Meiser Behema. And then you have the flip rule. Ukshechayovim b'Meiser Behema. Let's assume they do have to give off Meiser Behema. If two brothers have to give Meiser Behema, why would they give Meiser Behema in animals that they own jointly? Partners are potter. Only way that they can have to give Meiser Behema is because Le'aleinu, after Papa died, they haven't split the money yet. And each of them agrees, we're going to take $500 out of Papa's money, $500, and another $500, we're going to take $1,000 out of Papa's money. We're not splitting anything yet. We're going to take $1,000 out of Papa's money, and we're going to buy animals. Those animals don't belong to the two brothers as partners. They were bought from Papa's money. Therefore, they would be required to give Meiser Behema. Ukshechayovim b'Meiser Behema, if the two brothers would have to give Meiser Behema, which means they never split up Papa's money and they're not partners. If they're not partners, the animals that they buy would have to give Meiser Behema. But in that case, Peturim and a kalbon. If they pay it from Papa's money, then Papa's money is paying for these two brothers, then there is no kalbon. For kamahu kalbon, okay, and how much is already a kalbon? We gave an example, 20 agurot. Ma'o kesef, divrei Rav Meir. Rav Meir says there's a certain amount of kesef, whatever that measurement is. The Rav gives us the amount on those days. And the Chum say no. A kalbon is half of a ma'ah. So Rav Meir holds the kalbon is more. The Chacham hold the kalbon is less. Okay, and that's in summary fashion the sugya of kalbon. If you want to in any way review it, the best place to review it in its simplicity is page 8 in the Mishnah Behira, the chart at the bottom of the page. You have all the people that are potter in kalbon, all the people chayiv in kalbon, and the different cases that can trigger kalbon. Before I answer the chat questions on kalbon to the extent I can, We want to wish her a for shlema to Shoshana Rivka Bas Miriam Zahava Elowat. That's Shmuel's daughter, who underwent yesterday eye surgery, corrective eye surgery. She's Baruch Hashem doing well. She's at home, and she's ever for Shalema B'Sech Shachol Yisrael. And as I said to Shmuel yesterday, her eyes should be zeicha to see only the most wonderful, beautiful, amazing, good things in life. For Shalema Shoshana Rivka Bas Miriam Zahaba. Now I'll take a look at the Kalbon questions, and we'll see what we can do with them. When it's a loan, does the neighbor also owe for the Kalbon? You're raising now, this is not even a Kalbon question, this is a Ribis question, because I paid the Machtis HaShekel for my neighbor, and because I paid it for my neighbor, it triggered Kalbon. And now the question is, can I collect the half a shekel from my neighbor plus the Kalbon, or only the Machtis HaShekel? I don't know. That would be a Ribis question. And it almost sounds like the famous question of someone comes and asks me for a favor, and he says, can I use your credit card or some other form of money? And you let him use your credit card, and he puts it on the credit card to pay in 3 installments. And over those 3 installments, let's say he charged $100 to your credit card. By the time those 3 installments are paid, it's $109. Are you allowed to take the $109 back from him, or only the 100? The 100 is what the loan is. The $9 is ribis that the credit card company charged for you, which you're passing now on to him, a charge of interest you would have never had except for the fact that he used your credit card. Similar kind of question. It is a ribis question, and I don't know what the answer to that is. Next, are these cases discussing when a person pays the gizbar rather than the shulchani? The shulchani does not work for the Beis Hamikdash. He has his own table in the marketplace. When you go to him and you want to convert a shekel into two machtas shekels, you're going to pay a fee. If you come to the Beis Hamikdash and you want to pay the gizbar, and you give him a shekel and you want to get change, that's the last case in the first Mishnah we read today, where you're going to pay the double kalbon. So are these cases discussed when a person pays the gizbar rather than the shulchani? Shulchani is a private business. He's not part of the Beis Hamikdash. When the Mishnah says that the shulchanos opened up, it doesn't mean that it was a private enterprise of the Beis Hamikdash. The first Mishnah says that on the 15th day of Adar, the shulchanos opened up all over the country. It really doesn't mean any type of private enterprise. It doesn't mean a public enterprise of the Beis Hamikdash. It means this is when the shulchanim, the money changers, would go around the country to facilitate the change of the machtas hashekel. And to the extent that Beis Hamikdash, that the gizbar would send out people to help with the money exchange process, be no different than the private money exchange person. The point is, you can't take advantage of hektish. In other words, if you would go to a private person and you would have to pay a fee, you can't come to the gizbar and expect the gizbar not to collect the fee and for him to absorb the fee, which means that now the Beis Hamikdash is paying to help you pay your machtas hashekel. You can't do that. If you have to pay a shulchani or a money changer, you're going to have to pay the Beis Hamikdash. We are not concerned money change will support, so don't accept the kabul. When we talk about the gizbar, When the gizbar takes a maktas a shekel from a woman, he can't take a kalbon. Assuming, again, the maktas a shekel is worth $100, this woman didn't have to give anything to the Beis HaMikdash. So she comes out of benevolence of her heart, fully taught Mosa Yafa Yafa to convert her private money to public money. Now the Beis HaMikdash has $100 extra that it would have never had because she doesn't have to give it at all. So to now, we're not going to add, some salt, so to speak, to this and say, well, now that you decide out of the goodness of your heart to give us $100, we're going to charge you also 20 agurot for an exchange fee of some kind. According to the Chachamim, you would not charge her at all. Remember, according to the Chachamim, if I come to the Beis HaMikdash as a male over 20 and I say, here's the maktas a shekel, and if a woman comes and says, here's a maktas a shekel, it's also end. The question is, do you have to pay a kalbon when you give a maktas a shekel for a woman? So I come to the Beis HaMikdash, I give the gizbar a shekel, and I say, half of the value is for me, half the value is for my wife. He looks at me and says, I want 20 agurot. I say to him, what are you talking about 20 agurot? That's all I had to give you was a maktas a shekel worth $100. Instead, I gave you a shekel worth 200. And now you have 100 extra dollars. You want to charge me 20 agurot? So there's no kalbon that's paid by a woman or a kalbon that's paid on behalf of a woman. No. There's a confusion here about gizbar and shulchani. Forget the word gizbar. Okay, gizbar is just the treasurer of the Beis HaMikdash. A gizbar and a shulchani are just, the gizbar is the treasurer of the Beis HaMikdash. I just used the word gizbar as a person who actually went to the Beis HaMikdash and paid the gizbar. Let's forget the gizbar. A person goes, as we're going to learn next week, there's a collection in the city. The city collector comes and knocks on the doors, or when he has to do the forcible collection, or people come to him by the 15th of Adar, or between the 15th and the 25th, and say, here's a maktas a shekel. Done according to the Chachamim. In Beit Shemesh, at the Merkaz, there is a collection booth. The 15th of Adar, they set up a collection booth for maktas a shekel. I go to the collection booth, I give a maktas a shekel. I say bye-bye, according to the Chachamim. According to Reb Meir, I say, here's the maktas a shekel at the Merkaz. Reb Meir says, add the 20 agurot, because we don't know if you gave the proper weight. According to Chachamim, it's just a maktas a shekel. I walk to the Beit Shemesh Merkaz, and I give the money changer a shekel. And I say the shekel is for me and for my wife. No kalbon. You don't pay kalbon for women. I just gave you a massive profit. I was supposed to give you a half a shekel worth $100. I gave you a shekel worth 200. You can't charge me a kalbon for my wife. That's what we're talking about. Forget the word gizbar. It's a local community collection, and you'll go into the collector and you say, here's the maktas a shekel, or here's the shekel. And are you required then to give a kalbon or not a kalbon? Whether you walk to the Beis HaMikdash and give it into the Beis HaMikdash, you give it into the collector, these rules are the same rules. If you go to a shulchani, a private business, a person only has shekels at home, and he wants to give a maktas a shekel, so he can go to a private money changer and say, here's a shekel, give me 2 halves. He will charge you whatever he charges you for that money exchange. If you do this through the collectors at the Merkaz, they charge you a kalbon, which is a set fee. We learned at the end of the Mishnah today, according to Reb Meir, it's a ma'ah, and according to Chachamim, it's a chatzimah. In actuality, isn't the man paying for his wife from his money? Okay, so he's paying for his wife from his money. He's still not required to pay for his wife. Mathematics. I only have to give the gizbar half a shekel worth $100. I gave the gizbar a full shekel worth $200. Half of the shekel represents mine, and half of the shekel in the shekel represents my wife, who doesn't have to give a single penny to the gizbar, doesn't have to give a single penny to the collector. The collector, the Beis Hamikdash now has a profit of $100 because my wife wasn't required to give it at all. The Beis Hamikdash now has a profit of $100 because I gave an extra half shekel on behalf of my wife. The collector is not going to say, now flip over another 20 agurot. I wasn't required to give you the $100 to begin with. What do you mean give you another 20 agurot? But maybe I'm going to have to now, as the collector, go into the market and break your shekel into 2 matzos a shekel. Because so they break the shekel into 2 matzos a shekel and pay the 20 agurot to break it. You're still $99 ahead. And you want to charge me a kalbon because I gave you an extra $100? So we don't charge a kalbon when you pay matzos a shekel for someone who otherwise would be required to pay it at all.